Good morning, everybody. We will start this session in another few minutes. A very good morning and a warm welcome to all the guests, officials, speakers, and participants of the webinar and the awareness session on occasion of Cyber Jagrukta Divas. Information Security Education and Awareness, ISEA, is an initiative by HRD Division of Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. One of the major objectives of ISEA is to spread mass awareness on cybersecurity targeted towards various user segments, with CDAC Hyderabad as coordination agency for National Awareness Program. Today, ISEA conducts the webinar on cybersecurity for awareness in the field. The webinar aims to make the participants aware about the various cybersecurity threats and hygienic digital device usage practices to safeguard themselves against these threats. This session is organized as part of Cyber Jagrukta Divas as recommended by Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. Cyber Jagrukta Divas, which is conducted on the first Wednesday of every month, aims to create awareness on cybercrime and safe cyber hygiene practices among the citizens of India. Today's session is on cyber offenses and its legal implications. We sincerely hope that the seminar will benefit the participants in understanding the subject and gain useful information and cyber hygiene practices related information. A hearty welcome to one and all once again. I now take the privilege of introducing our speaker of the session, Dr. Karnika Seth. Dr. Seth is an internationally renowned cyber law, IP and media law expert practicing in the Supreme Court of India since 22 years. She acts as legal advisor to the Ministry of Information Technology, Government of India, and actively contributes her expertise in various national projects. She is appointed country chair cybersecurity for G100, a global group of women thought leaders. She is an accomplished arbitrator, author, policymaker, and a highly inspiring speaker in conferences, print and electronic media, and television. Dr. Seth is the founder of Seth Associates, an established law firm based in Delhi that renders legal services to both domestic and global clients. Dr. Seth's contribution to the growth and development of cyber laws in India and internationally is widely acknowledged in the corporate world. She has been empaneled as a member of working group for ICANN formed to design the policy framework impacting global domain registration services. She is also an accredited international arbitrator in arbitral institutions in India and abroad, including WIPO, Geneva, and Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, London. Dr. Seth was confirmed the Platinum Excellence Amrit Award 2022 and the Great Indian Woman Award in 2021 and National Gaurav Award in 2017 for exemplary contribution to cyber laws. She received the Digital Empowerment Award in 2015 and the Law Day Award from the Chief Justice of India for her book, Protection of Children on Internet. She also received the Law Day Award in 2012 for her book, Computers, Internet, and New Technology Laws. Her specialties include cyber law, data privacy, data protection, media laws, intellectual property, business laws, joint ventures, litigation, corporate laws practice, arbitration, international trade, anti-dumping, technology laws, cyber awareness, cyber education. Thank you, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time for the benefit of the audience today. I now request you to kindly take over the session.
Good morning to all. It's an important, very pertinent topic we're going to discuss today. And I once again thank ISEA and CDAC for organizing this important webinar and training on, cyber law and how cyber crime, cyber law is intertwined and, how we can actually curtail and curb cyber crimes and what is the modus operandi of criminals and obviously the best practices for cyber safety. Now, as part of this ecosystem for last 22 years, I think we have seen a very overwhelming change in terms of evolution of law. Not just technology has spotted a great growth in the country. We are global leaders now in tech and especially AI, metaverse, and in India as a country has not only been leading in terms of technology, but also we have increasingly worked on important policy changes in the country and laws, reforming our laws, including data protection, of which we'll be talking about even in today's program. So my association with MeitY has been very long, and I'm very happy to say that excellent work has been done on both the lines. Whenever it talks about when we talk about cybersecurity or when we talk about laws, the way IT Act we see IT Act evolve now is even more at a greater speed. This is something that we've been part and parcel of, working on the legal framework as well. So we'll be talking about both tech and law today in my presentation. I'd like to share the PPT with you. Please give me
Yes, ma'am. The privileges were given it to you, ma'am.
Yes. So I'll just start from the beginning. Okay, so I hope you are able to see the screen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Right. So as we all understand, when we talk about cybercrime, it is an electronic crime. When we say electronic crime, either the data, for example, or a device could be a target of a crime, or it could be something that is a medium to commit a crime. So we'll be talking about both, but starting from the statistics. Are you able to see the first screen of statistics, please?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes,
Okay, so like other countries in the world, if you see the figures of which how cybercrime has increased in the country, particularly during the pandemic, it has been phenomenal. So whereas the reported cases have increased, especially in the months of 2022 alone, you can see the figures are glaring. Almost 78% of Indian organizations have experienced cybercrimes like ransomware attack. With almost 80% of those attacks, they resulted in data encryption. There were reports to say even by MHA that even 500% increase in certain crimes has occurred during the pandemic. So whereas the filings of crimes on cybercrime have been, as per the NCRB report, have been in the range of 52,000 odd cases, but certainly there have been certain unreported cases also. And certain figures have indicated cybercrime related cases have almost been to about 14 lakh or so. So that's a lot of, if you talk about figures, that projects a lot of, crime that is already taking place in the country. So as senior officials of the government and as law enforcement bodies, we need to do a lot in terms of how we can curtail cybercrime and the best practices in not only safeguarding ourselves but also our organization and its crucial data. So hence what we are now discussing is that although the crime has decreased a little from say 16.4% in 2020 to about 15% in 2021, we still have a long way to go. And therefore, we have to have a complete roadmap and strategy on how we can, curb cybercrime. Now, I will like to just take you through, couple of these important cybercrimes that we have faced in this country in the last few years. For example, we talk about ransomware attacks, in the first place, because they have been quite rampant in this particular period. Now, what is a ransomware attack? Just to give you a very brief, a very basic idea on the same, I'm sure you would have seen or dealt or read about the ransomware attacks. It is a form of malware which would infect a particular device or a system and encrypt the files in it so that it is not, you're not able to open the files, you're not able to see the files and read the data in it. And that requires a decryption key in order to access it back. And a lot of criminals, they take advantage of the anonymity of cyberspace and various tech tools available, including malware, to cause these particular attacks. And when they do so, that could be done through either phishing mails. For example, an email would come with an attachment which has malware in it. And there could be software flaws also, which could be attack, vulnerabilities with which they, take and encrypt the data in a device. And then decryption becomes a difficult scenario, and they would ask for bitcoins. So they would release the data only once the bitcoins would be given to them. That's a very, very rampant attack which has happened. The latest one you would have seen is or read about is the Ames attack. Again, critical infrastructure systems or important healthcare services also have been affected world over with ransomware attacks. From small organizations to big organizations, these ransomware statistics are glaring. If you look at the total projection and for total, I would say graph, then it has 51% increase of ransomware incidents in 2022 itself compared to the last year. So whether it is manufacturing, IT, finance, healthcare, all sectors have been affected. Now, if we look at the certain figures, they have shown that almost 14 lakh incidents have been there, and 27,000 odd defacements of the website that has been reported. And a lot of these attacks have happened on .in websites also. So not only ransomware attacks, web defacements, phishing attacks, all have pervaded the cyberspace and particularly attacked Indian institutions. This is a ransomware spread. How it spreads. It's a basic slide which show you that the kinds of ransomware leaks which have happened in India, like Lockbit or Conti or Black Matter, and how the ransomware has spread either through remote desktop protocols or malicious URLs, either through malvertising, an advertisement which contains a malware. When you click on it, it lands into a ransomware attack. Drive by downloads. So any downloads which have been made but without an antivirus or an anti-spyware, that can be dangerous as well. And then email attachments, of course, is one of the very common modus operandi of criminals. Then when we talk about, attacks, the recent attack of AIMS, for instance. Now, large scale, paralyzing or jeopardizing of the systems and functions of a particular healthcare institution. Like this is we've just witnessed in the country, and it takes either if they're available these keys to decrypt the data. If they're available in open like on the internet, it's still easy, but most of them are not easily decrypted, and because of that a lot of problems occur, because obviously the data is crucial to such organizations, and if you don't get the data back, it is a problem. So time to time data backups have to be taken by these institutions, and that's important because if that practice is not maintained and there is a ransomware attack, then a lot of crucial data in the gap time is compromised and it's not available. So these are important aspects one needs to understand in terms of safety measures. Obviously, there are certain checks that we recommend, like not clicking on unsafe links, avoiding disclosing any sensitive information, not opening email attachments which you don't trust, using only resources to download which are credible, using VPN services on public Wi-Fi's, and updating the OS and having your antivirus and anti-spyware in check. So that is something that is a very everyday basis that needs to be implemented. Now, in corporate world, we've dealt with these cases which talk about man in the middle attacks. Interestingly, there was one case, where there's a buyer and a seller. Now, in that establishment, what happened was that, invoices used to float. So between the accounts offices of these two, buyer and seller. And the key people who were dealing with these invoices and email exchange, they were impersonated by a third person who became a middleman. And this person forged the invoice also. So the buyer and seller actually thought they were talking to each other, but there was a middle person who was actually a hacker who was perpetrating this attack and using a very similar looking email ID, which he created. He forged the email address and also the email invoice. And this monies were routed when the buyer paid the monies were routed to another entity in another country, which had a similar looking name as that of a seller. So these are very rampant again, man in the middle attacks, and we contacted the embassy offices, contacted the bank to stop the payments from being taken away. It needs a very quick response time. And therefore, I say that having a very close-knit international cooperation is very, very important for India now, because of these crimes becoming increasingly transborder. So our usual MLAT system, which we use, mutual legal assistance treaty system or the bilateral treaty system, we have timelines which are not very quick. And this is a tangible data, and the footprint of electronic tracing is very, very difficult sometimes with because like all these criminals employ techniques like anonymous proxy server, or they camouflage, they hide their real IP addresses using some tools which are available on the dark web, and Tor or anonymous proxy servers, and employing the technique called onion routing, through which it becomes difficult to trace them. But even though you're able to trace them, getting the data back into India for investigation is a challenge unless we do it fast. So therefore, in such attacks, you need a good convention that is important, and we have suggested recommendations. We are already working as a country to build a UN-based convention, or look at the EU convention, for instance, on how we can speeden up this whole process. So coming to the way in which this whole middle man in the middle attack is committed, it could be through various means. One, for the first, in a nutshell, in a very short, simple words, there is an interception which happens. So the traffic is intercepted, and the person who is victim, he's actually taken to attacker's network, rather than interacting with a particular website. For example, if he's banking, he's not really taken there, he's taken to an attacker's network. So there would be a hijack through IP spoofing, IP changing the IP address, or the creating ARP messages to connect the attacker's MAC address to IP address of a legitimate user, or DNS spoofing. So these kind of techniques are used to intercept, and then there is a decryption also. So in a SSL traffic that could be intercepted, it must be decrypted without altering the user, so, or the application. So there are various ways, as I said, HTTPS spoofing, SSL beast, or SSL hijacking or stripping. These are possibilities through, even they could bypass the SSL. That these are ways in which one can commit the ransomware attacks. But no, even if we don't get into the intricacies of the same, it's very important to know that clicking on a link could actually land you in a place which is a network of the attacker, and where if you put in a fake, like your real details or credentials, those could be compromised, and it could land you onto even a phishing attack could be clubbed with it, or it could be the whole data, or the whole device, the hard disk could also get encrypted. These are possibilities and various means of committing the ransomware attacks. In terms of, if you look at vulnerability attacks, then ATMs have been compromised, all over the world. In fact, there were certain attacks, including Indian, I would say the banking system. The ATMs were targeted because of a vulnerability in the OS. And we've seen that happen. And therefore, there is a need for having the complete updated OS in all the banking systems, especially, or even otherwise any critical systems. So when we say Wi-Fi, then obviously, the WPA3 Wi-Fi networks, which are very secure networks, they are recommended. And using private networks, if you're using private networks, and obviously credible private networks, logging out from the sensitive websites if you have really used it anywhere, especially public Wi-Fi's, and maintaining proper password chain. So that's important, having a password manager which keeps all the record of passwords which you may have kept on various websites. Using multi-factor authentication is also a norm nowadays, and firewalls to ensure safe internet connections, and antivirus software to protect your devices. So a lot of people use freeware, which is really not recommended, because they could contain malwares themselves in it. So that's something which I really recommend that one shouldn't be using. I know that doesn't happen in government organizations. It is far more, these steps are really taken and it's ensured that, these basic checks and balances are at least in place. But a lot of private, institutions are not using the same. However, there are still government bodies which get attacked, and including any I would say organization which is government body, they have also been vulnerable to attacks. And having worked, also in the defense sector, I've seen the kind of, attacks which have happened. And I've seen the steganographic, clips, which are actually clips which are, something which will show as if it's a music file, but it's not a music file. It's inside it, there is another, strategy or a exercise to defraud a particular, person who could be targeted victim. So it could be anything, related to anti-national activity also. And those are techniques which these criminals are really using through online means and tech, to commit these crimes. Now, another important aspect, or offense, as we call it, is phishing. So now what happens in phishing is it's a term which we use to, connote that there is a person who is trying to conceal his real image and, pose as someone else. For example, a banker, an insurance vendor, or somebody who's asking for certain details which are, confidential. So it could be your credit card details, it could be your password, anything which is sensitive, and that would be taken, once it's extracted from the victim, there would be a compromise of that data or misuse of that data to either siphon off monies or cause some sort of a financial loss. That is the term we use for phishing. Now, again, a number of times for this, either a criminal would be using a fake website. It would be a lookalike website of a bank, for example, where, for example, a lot of people just type on Google a name of a bank and go on, to the first website which shows on the result, which is completely a very, very dangerous scenario, because if you do that, it could be a fake or a lookalike website, and attacker, may cause phishing with it. So that's why it's important to remember the web URL of that particular bank and see in it if it contains an HTTPS, at the URL. There's a lock at the URL address bar, and that then once you're sure, only then type in, your confidential data therein. So there are various hybrids of phishing as well. I'm sure you would have heard of these terms sometime or the other, but often I've seen clients who call up and say that we've been attacked by phishing, we have been kind of victims of phishing or smishing. Phishing is nothing but a hybrid of phishing, where often you would have heard people, just sometimes share their experiences. Somebody called me and posed as a company executive, promised me a job, or said I've won a lottery, or I have, to buy, say, furniture, and the person, has kind of posed as somebody who wants to sell the furniture, and asking you to pay money through a payment gateway or payment app, or any kind of wallet. So that's something we commonly heard. And then what happens once you've seen QR codes scams these days? So once the phishing happens, you would probably share on social media a link and ask him to pay online. And once you click on that link, it will compromise the device security, and anything that comes on that device, for that matter, if it's an OTP, for instance, it can be seen by the person who is an attacker. So therefore, most of these crimes are not standalone crimes, I'll say. A lot of the criminals are using multi techniques to commit various crimes. So there would be probably multiple offenses. In phishing, there is also involves identity theft, because he's posing as someone else. And then it involves also, cheating by personation, because he's actually posing as someone else and then cheating the other person. So 420 gets involved in IPC. And identity theft under section 66C and D, cheating by personation, they are offenses under our Information Technology Act also, where the punishment is up to 3 years of imprisonment, fine or more. So, and then phishing technique could also employ a ransomware attack could also be alongside it. Maybe, a criminal uses that alongside. So depending on the facts of every case, there are various, I would say, connotations, and there are various implications, which law gets involved and which offense is being committed. And if there are multiple offenses, that could also be attracted. So smishing, for example, is now a text-based, for example, if there is a SMS which comes. Now, that SMS could be malicious again. It could have a link to a particular, malware-based site, or it could have a kind of a virus within it. So, or could misguide someone to click on another link, which takes them to another fictitious, like a fake website. So again, for the reason that they want to earn monies, so therefore we have to be very, very vigilant whenever we click on any link. That is the most important thing, and don't trust anyone who calls you and poses as someone else. So ATM frauds are also rampant, as you see from these this particular slide. Recent data breaches have been many. So right from companies like Airtel or an Academy or MobiKwik, all of them have been sometime or the other target of data breaches. And ATM frauds have also risen in the country, and a lot of people are employing money mules. So they would have a middle person, and once the fraud happens, the monies commissions are paid to those mules, and monies are siphoned off from another area or a particular place where the ATM machine is. Cloning of cards has been rampant in banking system. We have seen a new magnetic chip-based credit cards being issued. There is tighter security now, using of OTP and other mechanisms to safeguard a lot of monetary transactions. Yet we still see a lot of times the cards being spoofed or ATM frauds still taking place. So that's why it's important to safeguard, adopt some best practices when we're using any ATMs. Now, cybersecurity threats, if we see to government, specifically certain data, clearly projects and shows what is, the figure really that we see. So there have been as many as almost 50,000, 48,000 attacks in the country. And therefore, the incidents have risen even in terms of government related organizations in the last 6 years has been phenomenal. And if you see the recent malware attacks, then a lot of malware attacks have also surfaced. Even Facebook business ads, they were targeted in a malware campaign. So using of two-factor authentication mechanisms is important, and one has to think twice before one clicks on any particular URL or a link. Installing anti-phishing, I would say malware-proof or anti-malware softwares is also important, and keeping the browsers updated, installing firewalls, and regularly updating the passwords. And being very careful of when you click on pop-up ads. That's something that even in gaming now, gaming has been a very important area that youngsters or even otherwise people are involved in these days. We recently have issued rules on gaming as well, and changing the due diligence guidelines for that sector. So increasingly we saw a lot of problems specifically relating to children happening on that area, because they were being driven into grooming and cyber pornography or content which is not fit for their age. So a lot of times these also land up, those ads will also land you up into phishing sites or other kinds of malware based attacks. So therefore it's important to check on what ad is being, if you're clicking on a particular ad as well. Now, coming to social networking attacks, there are very many, networking attacks. If you see any fake profiles, they're being created on the web very, very often, and attackers are targeting the platforms, which, usually you would see they try to, send a friend request, and once that is accepted, there is an exchange of information, and they would probably share a clip which looks like a news. It could be anything or any information. Again, it could have malware within it. So clicking on such links can also be very, very risky. And many times fake news is spread through social media. That has also been looked into. And with MHA, we were looking at how we can curb fake news, and ministry, and they've been working on this aspect as well. So social media is one platform where most of these criminals find refuge, because they feel that it's easy, where people are not on guard when on social media, and they can easily attack the victim. So that's something that one needs to work on and be very, very vigilant on social media. Then there have been certain types of attacks on, particularly on social media. Like I said, identity theft, even bullying, intimidation, trolling, following somebody to harass another person or cause fear in the other person, fear of defamation, fear of any kind of hurt or harm to a person. Those are certain offenses which are again punishable under our IT Act. I will come to those slides, but just wanted to give you a brief idea on what are the kinds of crimes which are prevalent today, and see what we need to do to safeguard ourselves from it. So if we find, for example, any ad blockers which we have on our websites or on our desktops or laptops, you can use ad blockers, block certain content, certain websites from opening. You can set your protocols even in the browser, and it's important to use anti-spyware and anti-phishing software on your webs, like on your devices. Now, if you're using any kind of public Wi-Fi, for instance, if you're traveling or on the airport or otherwise, very, very cautious, be very cautious on using the public Wi-Fi and hotspots. Now, that is a haven for criminals again. Now, let's look at, the statistics we have discussed, but if you look at the kinds of attacks, especially malware attacks on government organizations in India and other countries, just I'm talking about 2022, every month there have been many of these attacks, not just in India, but also abroad. So if you see, in Ukraine, for instance, there have been attacks, and, in Chinese-backed government entities also in US, for instance. There have been criminals who breached the UK Foreign Office network. Also, Greek Parliament's information technology systems, they were compromised. Almost 60 email accounts hacked. And likewise, it's not just India, but also, there have been other countries affected with these malware attacks, and government organizations I'm talking about. Like a Pakistani linked group used remote access to spy on Indian military and diplomatic targets. These are all being reported on the web, and I've only extracted certain important information in that regard. And if you see the other months, phishing attacks have again been major target. They've made a target of Ukrainian government officials. Their Telegram accounts were compromised. Likewise, if you see one Iranian cyber espionage actor, he was blamed for phishing campaign against Jordan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service attacks, have also been targeted. They've targeted the Norwegian government institutions. So a lot of these, as I said, are used, in tandem. For example, there's a phishing attack coupled with a ransomware attack, malware attack. All these are actually interchangeable in some ways, or they're important ingredient. So when there's a malware, therefore there is a ransomware. There is a cheating or identity theft, therefore there is phishing. So they are important ingredients of these offenses. Now, looking at this slide, if you see, again, Estonian government and private institutions also, they were, target of, I would say, attacks, and there were also many attacks. Obviously, they use anonymous groups. They are those groups which they will not be easily traceable. And there have been, certain groups like these attacking government systems, and many times they're using these camouflaging techniques, and it becomes difficult to track, especially if they're using Tor and other networks. So we have to be proactive on our defense in our army and naval air force. We have to have proactive vigilance, and there have been increasingly debates and discussions even on the drone segment, how we can protect ourselves and the country's defense borders. So a lot of law is also changing on that account in the country because of these tech developments. So, like we said, pro-Russian hackers, they took down government sites in Colorado and other countries and places like Kentucky. And so many of these attacks, they are known to happen because they know the vulnerabilities in the government sites and systems. They know which critical infrastructure can hamper the country's, functioning in the worst possible manner, and therefore those are the main targets of, such attacks. Coming to our legal statutes, I would now, I have discussed the basic crimes which we have seen, the main crimes, if you look at the country as a whole, and which has not only affected the government sector, but the corporate sector as well. Looking at the statutes, it's important to understand that our IT Act is a special law. Is a special law which works alongside with IPC, which is a general law. So there are lots of provisions under our IPC which will still apply, like 420, for instance, as I said, in cheating by personation or in phishing attack, cases. While we do also have special law, like we have section 66C and D, for instance, in our IT Act, which talks about or prescribes punishment for cheating by personation and identity theft. Similarly, for computer-related offenses, we have section 66 of our IT Act, as we normally use the term hacking for it. But it's not mentioned, the term is not mentioned in the IT Act, but the effect of the same or those acts which make hacking, they are defined there. And up to 3 years of imprisonment, fine or more is what has been prescribed there is for hacking. Now, there are definitely other statutes which are also important, like we have the Criminal Procedure Code, the Indian Evidence Act, and in many cases where, for example, there is a violation of a trademark. So there is, a trademark act which will be involved. If there's money laundering, for instance, there's a PML Act which will apply. So depending on the act, the acts involved which create or lead to an offense or constitute an offense, we use the special law applicable. This is a very interesting slide which will give you an oversight, an overview on what are the basic offenses that we have under our IT law framework. Currently, we also have specific law in IPC on stalking. So if a woman is stalked, if there is video voyeurism, without any permission, unauthorizedly recording of any like obscene content and publishing or circulation of the same, any kind of sexual harassment, those cases, trolling, bullying, those are all dealt with under our IPC also, like section 354 A, B, C, D, all talk about that. Again, 3 years of punishment or more, imprisonment or more. That is a fine or more. This is the general, I would say, the kind of term that is given as of punishment in such offenses. And when we talk about pornography, for instance, in section 67, 67A, IT Act applies. Again, 3 years of punishment, fine or both. In terms of invasion of privacy, recording of clips which are unauthorized and then circulation of the same, up to again 3 years of punishment, fine or more. In child pornography related cases, more than 5 years, again punishments are there up to 5 years on fine or both. And likewise, identity theft and phishing I've already talked about. We have cyber defamation, 500 IPC. We have punishments for hacking under IT Act, 3 years or more. Then extortion and criminal intimidation. These are already provided for under the general law, and those punishments could be up to 1 year, 2 years or more. So usually we see if there are clubbed offenses, then punishments would be the larger, the greater punishment which could be given as a term on conviction, of course. And proving of the same requires electronic evidence also to be submitted, which will be also covering, but it's possible to even read electronic evidence as a proof in the courts of law. So this slide, basically showcases the various kinds of offenses which fall under the spectrum of cybercrime today. There are definitely new offenses. We will have, for example, offenses for say fake news. We still have to evolve our law to a great extent to cover other set of laws, other set of issues which we are coming up with. Uh, Issues of, I think there are going to be new issues on AI and metaverse related laws. While we have seen crypto frauds been covered under IPC itself, but or RIT Act, there are going to be more offenses with the new tech, terminology. We'll have more offenses covered under our IT Act in the near future. So where there is not a specific need, policies are being framed to, explain or apply the existing law to certain new offenses, but where, for instance, if it may not be possible to apply the existing law, there's a new law called out for the same. So let's talk about now these offenses in particular. Currently, our 43A section is talking about, protecting user data. So there are lots of websites which collect a lot of user data from us, so their personal information you have to safeguard. Any body corporate needs to safeguard. And if they fail to do that, they don't, for instance, apply reasonable security parameters, they could be held liable. So they have to pay compensation. Increasingly, we've been part of this exercise. We have tried to decriminalize a lot of our law, not only IT Act, but other laws as well in the country to liberalize, our economies and the investments, and also give, legal redressal to the victims in a way which is beneficial for all. Because right now, a lot of these punishments, are not deterrent enough. Once there is a particular offense up to 3 years, they are bailable, they are cognizable but bailable. So there are heavy fines imposed, there are hefty fines imposed. The current, if you see the data protection bill, the new bill which has come, raises this penalty to up to 500 crores. That is a huge deterrent. So there will be more compliance in that regard, and therefore there is a move to decriminalize for smaller minor offenses. Punishments are, like deleted, and for serious offenses, heavy penalties are being imposed. So currently, right now, we see most of these offenses under our IT Act, they are cognizable but bailable, barring a few exceptions like cyber terrorism, for instance, which is section 66F. Punishment up to life imprisonment is, given under that and prescribed. So this brings me to a very interesting, part of our discussion, because we are talking, about data protection. We've all seen how the whole journey started when we talked about, we were looking at the data protection angle, and Justice Sri Krishna Committee was, appointed to make this proposal on Draft Data Protection Act. And in 2019, there was a draft proposal. There were lots of amendments suggested later on when it went to the Joint Parliamentary Committee. Earlier, only personal data was being considered in the domain, but then non-personal data also was, basically advised to be clubbed with this whole data protection concept. But with the new data protection bill, since 2019, one was withdrawn, there's a new bill which is coming to place. That only limits it to personal data. And a lot of things which were there in the earlier 2019, proposal have been done away with. So issues like, localization of data, mirror image data to be kept in India, those provisions and other provisions we don't find really in the new particular bill which has been there. So the bill, as we now see it, it does guarantee a lot of those, measures which we wanted to see under this law, because like in Europe, For example, in GDPR, we have looked at individuals' right to privacy. In the Justice Puttaswamy case also in the Supreme Court, the nine-judge bench upheld this right, fundamental right to privacy of individuals in India and its citizens. So we've kept on that same vein. We have the right to privacy and fundamental right protected. So in the new law as well, what data is being collected from an individual, how it is processed, for what purposes, it has to be for lawful purposes, and express consent, explicit, express written consent has to be taken from the user. So earlier it used to be in very much a fine print, and a user would just click on I agree button, and there's a contract and there's a consent, and a lot of data which is not required. You will appreciate this point, because a lot of apps, when you download an app, you don't really see the terms and conditions, and you just click on I accept and I agree and move ahead. That's something which is not going to happen now. It has to be very explicitly given. Those things in fine print, it will not do. It has to be express consent from a user, and only the data which is needed should be given, and not anything which is extra that is not needed for that purpose. So that is going to be a practice, and consent-based approach will be adopted. So if there is a cross-border data flow required, for example, I'll just give you an example of Europeans. Europeans data processed in India simply can do that. It is possible to do that, and the permissions needed for GDPR and all will have to be complied here in India. But if Indian data has to go abroad, say in US or Europe or somewhere else, then certain parameters will be kept, because those parameters will have to be adhered to, and that prescribed norms have to be given by the central government. What will be reasonable practices, which will ensure that data is protected abroad as well. So what is those appropriate standards will have to be defined. This will liberalize our economies. Our data will also be protected, and that is the intention of the act, the particular proposal at this point. Now, if we look at the data principal, is the person who's giving the data, whose data is being collected. And data fiduciary, that's a person whose data is like he's collecting, the entity which collects the data. And we have a data protection, authority, like a board, which will be looking into any kind of compliances needed in this sphere. So there are 7 principles in the bill which we talk about, like data minimization, as I said, how much data is to be collected, it has to be saved. If you're sharing with somebody, who is the person or the agency you're sharing it with, all those have to be also explained and given in the policy. Safeguards have to be kept, and the right of withdrawal. If supposingly I don't want to give this data anymore, I've given a consent earlier, but I want to withdraw it, you can simply withdraw it. So those kind of rights have been given to a user. Right to erase, right to nominate. If a person wants to nominate a further nominee, that is a new right, and very simply put, this bill has been called out in a very seamless manner. But there are definitely new suggestions, and it's still being debated. A few aspects which need to be clarified or strengthened rather, to make it more effective is what is being debated on. So financial penalties, if we look at them, there are almost 500 crores of penalty, right from 50 crores. So that's a hefty penalty, and will invoke a lot of compliance, and that's the really intention of the whole exercise of data protection in India. And anybody who's giving false data could even be fined up to 10,000 rupees. So that's something new again, in order to invoke integrity in the transactions and the data which has been supplied to any entity, including government. So that's important. Certain exemptions have been kept by government. Now, for how much time the data is being processed, if there's a government entity which collects the data, there could be certain exemptions that it could continue to hold that data for obviously legitimate reasons and justifiable reasons, and that has to be reasoned for that reason, and within the framework of rule of law. It can't be something that can be arbitrary, of course. So these exemptions have been kept, and it could also exempt other bodies, which it feels or deem fit, it deems fit that this data is needed for, national interest or other security concerns. So that is, in broad spectrum. The center has also been given the authority to exempt those agencies on the grounds of, like we have in today's paper also talking about, there is a judgment which says that the right to freedom of speech and expression, there is a fundamental right of every citizen, but one can't read another, reasonable restriction in Article 19(2). So likewise, if we look at the proposed bill and this particular exemption, if there is a state which has been given a right to, I would say, where the overriding interest is of the state protection of its security and integrity of the nation, or its borders or sovereignty, then obviously those are important aspects for which an individual's privacy can be, I would say, subsumed, because the reason is that there is national interest involved. And for the same reason, if this kind of proposal is there in the bill, these are aspects which will be legitimate if they are falling within 19(2), for example. So similarly, if you look at an analogy for right to privacy, you can say that the data protection is there. However, if there are overriding interests of, India's sovereignty integrity, if to that extent, as defined in the Constitution, for that reason, the privacy of an individual can be subsumed. Only otherwise, obviously, when we look at on a general note, every citizen's data is protected, and the state's main mission is to protect and strengthen their data protection and privacy regime in India. A lot of critics have examined this, and I've also looked at it and debated on this aspect. But it's a very important aspect of the whole bill. Now, I would say, in a nutshell, I'd like to explain the legal recourse against cybercrime, because we do have both civil criminal remedies at this point. And when we say civil criminal remedies, if a particular data is compromised, for example, or disclosed to somebody else, there are clear-cut, I would say, punishments even under our IT Act. Section 72, 72A talks about that, and 43A, 43 talks about that. So compensation can also be claimed, and if somebody has a malintention and does it deliberately, then imprisonment and fine, both, is also prescribed in the Act. So, and when we talk about offenses, as I said, there are lots of offenses under Chapter 11. We have 3 years of punishment, fine or more, and mostly in most of these crimes. And what happens when there is an offense? Collection of content becomes important. Date, time, screenshots, reporting it to the nearest police station. Obviously, in the ministry and government departments, there is a, we always, we know that certain is, the authority in MeitY looking after, in fact, handling incident response, and, many of the, I would say, attacks which affect national security. There is a need now to inform mandatorily a fraud incident or a cyber attack which has happened, which affects any system of any organization, which could have a national impact as well. So within 6 hours time window, one has to inform, the particular certain, and that's important because these attacks spread so fast and they could really lead to a havoc. So the new laws and policies have been called out for that reason. Every data center, for example, has to keep data for 5 years, and other organizations up to at least 180 days. And that's important again, a new development. Earlier it used to be 90 days. So we have new laws we are talking about, and discussing every time there is a issue or a challenge. These have been debated and then revised depending on the need of the hour. So in civil remedies, injunction is claimed, restraint orders are there, blocking of websites happens, And courts have, ordered blocking, not just from visibility within India, even on a global level. There have been certain orders in the Art of Living case also, Shishi Ravi Shankar's case. There was a particular order where if it was uploaded defamatory content from India, global orders of injunction called dynamic injunction orders have also been passed by the courts. So it's not just blocking from within India, public access from accessing a website within India, but abroad as well. So those kind of new, I would say, changes in law, even in the case law, and our courts are appreciating the growing jurisprudence in cyber law to curb these problems. And then let's also look at the helplines. Obviously, the helplines are there: 112, 1098, 100, 1930, reporting at the cybercrime.gov.in portal. These are very, very well publicized, helplines, and mass media, whether it's television or internet, the word of mouth, people are spreading this word. A lot of legal aid agencies are functional, offering free legal aid also, and they publicize and advertise these. And it's important to explain to every victim there are both civil and criminal remedies today available for legal recourse. So as we see, this is the cybercrime.gov.in portal. We all have seen that many times that people are aware and they've started filing many cases. 50,000 odd cases have been reported even in single year. And on these lines, if we say the trend, whether it's data theft or hacking, debit card frauds, we've dealt with all kinds of fake insurance company cases, man-in-the-middle attacks, ransomware attacks, and in many of these cases which I've dealt with, there have been a very clear modus operandi that, for example, in an ex-employee, he would create a parallel company and create a fake another email ID, a personal email ID, where from his official ID he would park all the data, which is crucial, to his personal ID, and from personal ID he would then use it for the benefit of his newly formed company, a parallel company. So those kind of issues we have dealt with, and electronic evidence very becomes important. If that organization has good security systems, for example, uses DLP, which is data loss prevention software, they would have been sent an alert in any case. If something like this happens, they could prevent these crimes. And if this has happened and they can retrieve that from a platform of who has accessed, who has sent out data, then electronic evidence can be led in the courts to actually deal with these cases and argue these cases. So likewise, there have been cases where, for example, in a particular case where a foreign company was involved, there was a foreign client who wanted a website to be built, and the website was built by a US based company itself. The client was also US based, and there were hacking of servers later on because they used a platform called Jira to transfer the website and IP, intellectual property that they built for this client. But the vendor was using a back office in India, and so there was a hacking later on, which was caused through the back office. And those kind of cases, or the vice versa, I would say, for example, Indians, have given the services to another entity here and used a foreign service provider, and a foreign service provider comes, and circulates a particular, I would say, content out, and they siphon off the content that is happening. These are reported cases. They are found on the portals, and if that happens, certainly one could use that electronic evidence to prove before a court of law that the hacking has taken place after delivering the IP. So debit card frauds, fake insurance company claims, phishing attacks, all could be proven through electronic evidence. Using best practices is obviously important, as we have also said earlier. Using two-step verifications, good cybersecurity protocols at various endpoints and in the network, and blocking credit cards or helpline or debit cards whenever there's a issue, suspicious transaction. And if a server is hacked, for example, if a bank server alone is hacked, then there is zero liability for a customer. But if the customer is at fault and he then informs the bank, transactions happening unauthorizedly after that only can be, redressed against, but not before that. So those are certain important aspects, and informing the social media portal if there's a crime committed on their platform, informing the payment wallet company if there's a suspicious transaction. All these things become very, very important. So having looked at all these issues, I think there's one important aspect I want to highlight for blocking illegal content, because unlawful websites, they can be blocked. In cases of domain name disputes, we have an INDRP system for .in domain, where uh, the NICSI is the main body looking after .in, and an arbitral process follows, and the fake domain, if somebody is registered a deceptively similar looking domain, if it is with a bad intention, that can be transferred to the original owner if the original owner files a complaint. Those are actions which are possible. And for blocking, it is a different aspect. What I want to emphasize, what I just explained was the transfer of a domain. For blocking, it is an order given by the Secretary IT, for instance, can give that order if a nodal officer circulates, I would say escalates the complaint out, or it could be through a court order. So that all these provisions are given under our IT Act again, Section 69A. Talking of unlawful websites, obviously there are rules which we have for the same, and the mandate of 36 hours. Now it's also 24 hours in obscene content related cases. So with the new due diligence guidelines, there are different remedies which are available to people at large. We have due diligence guidelines of 2021, where MeitY has issued these guidelines, and we all know that there has to be a privacy policy, there has to be a grievance officer, terms of use have to be strengthened, cooperation by intermediaries, and their due diligence is escalated. So to that level, they have to have immediate, I would say, they have to abide by the compliance requirements, and significant social media companies, they need to have more stringent compliance requirements. So taking down content in 24 hours is a very, very important move, especially to block all kinds of obscene data from being circulated on the web. And we are increasingly using AI and photo hash mechanisms to do that. We have other aspects which are equally important here. We were talking about electronic evidence. So if you want to read more about that, the judgment in the Arjun Pandit Rao case of the recent judgment, where the courts have said that either in a case of an attack, you could give your device as an original device as evidence, or if you're giving a photocopy or a printout of the same, then that has to be backed with a Section 65B certificate, an affidavit, which says that this is authentic and nothing has been tampered with. And that is a compliance which is needed. If there is a third party which has that data, you can even, complainant can even ask the court to give a direction to that particular third party to supply that evidence out. So that is there. And if they yet don't comply with it, then court looks into other evidence which is available. But it is mandatory for admissibility to give a Section 65B certificate if one wants to produce this kind of a secondary evidence. So coming now to the end of our basic presentation, we'll take up questions after that. The cybersecurity checkpoints are very many. If you look at this slide, it's a very important slide which I often use because it very clearly lays out the various checkpoints on the basis of which one can actually safeguard our systems. So right from web hosting to email system security, multi-factor authentication, filtering, encryption, using the right OS, gateway security, local network security, user access protocols, endpoint protections, then threat analysis, end-to-end encryption of data, mobile device and management systems, then IT network and security policies, having good corporate security policies, IT policies, social media policy, and in the WFH times, we also built the work from home policies for companies. So that was another add-on, and they overhauled the whole process of working changed even for government entities. So there have been a lot of times that even government entities were hacked into during this time period, and their policies and networks and systems also had to be overhauled. So training, education, monthly vulnerability scanning, compliance with GDPR in case it's applicable, and then all these 16 checkpoints are very, very important for all our ecosystem of security. Often, clients are also using data protection, data loss prevention software, and that is very, very helpful. In a number of our cybercrime cases, we've kind of successfully either avoided crimes because those have red flagged the suspicious transactions, or if there's a crime committed, then easily one can prove it in a court of law that there has been, a cyber attack. So there is a lot to discuss, definitely within the time frames that we have. I may have shared a few case studies or, the modus operandi or best practices or how to safeguard ourselves, but yet there's so much to be talked about. So I understand we will have more sessions from time to time. But if you'd like to read more about this, I've written there have been 10, 15 books on the subject, various topics, which you can find on the Amazon. There have been the latest book is the Computers, Internet, New Technology Laws, updated in last year to 2022. And, you can see artificial intelligence, fake news, or even media trial or other important issues, protection of children on the internet. And lately I've also written on metaverse, which will be soon on the web. So you can read more about it, safeguarding privacy, data protection, all these aspects are there. So this is where we are based. We are based in Noida and Delhi, and at the Advanta IT Business Park in 7th floor. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask me. You can send it in writing also to our mail ID, mail@sateassociates.com. But we will be, I'd rather be happy to take a few questions right now, and I'm just stopping the presentation.
All right, ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful and enlightening presentation. I think there are so many questions which are lined up for you.
Sure.
Maybe some of the questions I will read it. So we just wanted your views on those things.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
You can just read out any important ones, then you can just quickly answer.
Though matters are reported to the police, why are the fraudsters are not caught? I think this is the confidence of not being caught motivates them to do more frauds. So that's one of the.
I do understand that there's a challenge, and in our country with the kind of population we have, and I'll be very frank. For last 2 decades or more, I've been training judicial academies, our judges and police officers all across India. We haven't spared any states really. The structured trainings have been conducted at every level, whether it's MeitY or it's our law enforcement frameworks, networks and academia. However, we see that the criminals are all the time there's a new technology involving, and we are grappling with the law. So we are trying to catch up with the law after that. So the trainings, they have been there for police. If you're launching a particular reporting a particular crime to the police, there are few police people who are trained, and often they get transferred to another job or the profile. So I have time and again said and advocated that once they're trained in that field, they should be kept in that area so that they can actually utilize the skill set which they've gained. That is one thing. And secondly, I have voiced this concern even at the MHA's conference, and I'm saying that again on this webinar, that we don't have a dedicated criminal justice system, criminal courts set under IT Act for cyber crimes. If we had special courts, like we have in POCSO, we have special courts to deal with children related crimes. Why don't we have special courts to deal with cyber crimes? If we have that, then immediately the backlog which is there in the courts, you can actually overcome that challenge, because there are new courts framed, and there'll be speedy justice. So to fast track this whole thing, if we are putting the same kind of in the same kind of other criminal cases, we are putting the cyber crimes also in the same array, then it is obviously not leading to faster convictions and hearings. That is also a challenge. So both at the time of investigation and at the time of criminal justice system, redressal system, we need reforms in the country.
All right, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And next question is, what is the immediate action to be undertaken if a government website is compromised?
If a government website is compromised, obviously we have certain itself, which will take immediate action. We have to report it to certain, and they will do our, incident response, and they'll guide you on that as well. And they would also send out white alerts or papers which need to be, put on the web for people at large. There have been various warnings given, and once you inform, the police obviously acts on that as well. And depending on the kind of crime which is involved, the remedial actions or mitigation actions will have to be made. If it is involving any health sector, if it is involving any, for example, it could be other transport or anything else. So accordingly, those steps have to be looked into. But yes, first check responses have to inform certain, and also the immediate police authorities.
Yes, ma'am. And one of the important system of the office has been attacked by a ransomware, and all the documents have been encrypted to XYZ format, and now are unable to view or open these files. Please suggest how to recover these
As I
files.
said, there are decryption keys sometimes available in open source, sometimes they're available, in public registry forms or otherwise, but it's difficult to get decryption keys and they may not be available. So mostly we have seen cases when such a thing happens. Either they try to pay bitcoins, and even after paying bitcoins, they don't get back the data. So it's important to keep backups on a very regular basis. So even if there is a compromise and you're not able to retrieve the data, at least the backup can be utilized to smoothen up the functioning. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And Ashwini sir, like I think your suggestion is well taken. So he's suggesting to strengthen the cyber security at organizational level. There should be some continuous awareness sessions and trainings for all the
Absolutely.
department officials. So that suggestion is well taken, sir. And thank you for the how many agencies to be reported for a ransomware incident?
How many agencies?
Yes, ma'am.
Depending on which sector of or industry has been affected, one definitely needs to inform certain, and the police, as I said. There could be other agencies involved depending on the sector. So every ministry, every department also has its own set of rules and norms that they follow. And in such cases, they would have an incident response mechanism built. So obviously that has to be triggered as well.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Is the ATM card theft considered as a cyber crime?
ATM, yes, why not? Because supposingly, there was one crime, where a person was putting in the password and, the keys, the numbers, using an ATM. Another person overlooks that and, steals the particular number. Then if the person left his card and, by mistake, and misuses the card, obviously it's a theft, because there's identity theft also involved, and there's cheating by personation. So those sections, depending on this is just an illustration, but there could be various sections which could apply under our IT Act, even with ATM frauds.
All right, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And in case a social media account is cloned, what is the process to get rid of this?
social media account is cloned. Yes,
Yes.
often we have dealt with these cases, and in one of the Instagram cases, when we send them a legal notice, there is a grievance officer, as you know, in every social media platform. When informed, they took action, and that particular profile was suspended and blocked. So you have to inform the social media platform first. If they don't take action based on your complaint, then obviously we go to the courts to take legal redressal.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, theft as per the IPC is non-bailable, but identity theft as per the ITC is bailable. Please clarify in that regard.
Well, yes, if we say, when we say cheating, 420 is non-bailable, right? Depends what ingredients you're using also. And in cases of data theft, it is something which is bailable, but that's the special law. So if it is an IT Act case where, Section 66 gets invoked, we can't make it a non-bailable offense because the statute provides that. So we have to go by the book. So that is, we have to look at particular ingredients of the offense, what make an offense, and then only, act on it. So it depends on the situation to situation. If it is not involving, say, for example, IT Act altogether and it's offline crime, then yes, the prescribed provisions of theft and, cheating and the IPC will apply.
All right, ma'am. We'll take the last question of the session, ma'am. Can you guide where can we get the standard crisis management plan, easy to follow and implement?
We have actually built those crisis management plans based on industry norms, but then in every case scenario, they have to be there are certain standard norms, but there are also case specific norms, because depending on the attack, a different strategy will have to be invoked. So I suggest, if you're really keen on a crisis management plan, then if it's a government sector, there are different set of norms and procedural, compliances which may have to be made. Like in terms of blocking, for example, if there's a website which is,